12:30 a.m., February 27, 1991, just 2 hours after the Battle of 73 Easting ended. The Tawakalna Division, Saddam Hussein's most powerful Republican Guard unit, is reeling. The 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment has gutted 2 of their brigades, 160 tanks destroyed, 180 armored personnel carriers, 12 artillery pieces. The survivors are trying to regroup to establish a new defensive line. They have no idea what's coming. Behind the 2nd Cavalry, the full weight of the U.S. 7th Corps is advancing through the darkness. The 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, and the 3rd Armored Division, 360 Abrams tanks, 340 Bradley fighting vehicles, 128 artillery pieces, the largest American armored division in history, moving at 30 miles per hour across the Iraqi desert. Their objective, Norfolk, a grid coordinate on a map, the intersection of the IPSA pipeline road and several desert trails, an Iraqi supply depot, and the last organized defensive position of the Tawakalna Division. What follows over the next 24 hours is not a battle, it's an execution, and when it's over, the Tawakalna Division will cease to exist. To understand what happened at Norfolk, you have to understand what the Tawakalna was and what it represented. The Tawakalna Mechanized Infantry Division was Iraq's most powerful military formation. Approximately 14,000 soldiers, 220 T-72 tanks, 284 infantry fighting vehicles, 126 artillery pieces, 18 multiple launch rocket systems. These weren't poorly trained conscripts. These were Republican Guard, Saddam's elite, hand-picked for loyalty and given the best equipment Iraq could field. The name itself, Tawakalna, means trust in God. It was the division Saddam Hussein trusted to protect Baghdad if the coalition broke through his forward defenses. The unit had fought for 8 years against Iran. They knew how to operate in the desert. They knew how to fight mechanized warfare. And they'd been preparing defensive positions in southern Iraq for months, convinced they could hold against anything the Americans threw at them. They were wrong. By the time the 1st Infantry Division reached the 75 Easting, just 2 kilometers east of where 73 Easting had ended, the Tawakalna was in chaos. The 18th Mechanized Brigade and 9th Armored Brigade were decimated. Survivors were pulling back, trying to orient on a new defensive line. Iraqi commanders were screaming into radios, trying to understand where the Americans were, how fast they were moving, how to stop them. The answer to that last question, they couldn't. The 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, is one of the most storied units in American military history. Organized in June 1917 for duty in World War I, it was the first American division to arrive in France, the first to fire artillery at the enemy, the first to suffer casualties, and the first to achieve victory when it captured the village of Cantigny in May 1918. General John Pershing called it Pershing's Own. He said the division had a special pride of service and a high state of morale never broken by hardship nor battle. That pride carried through World War II, North Africa, Sicily, Normandy, Belgium, and Germany. Through the Cold War, stationed in Germany as America's first line of defense against the Soviet Union. And now, in February 1991, the Big Red One was about to prove that Pershing's words still held true. The division was commanded by Major General Thomas Rame. For this operation, it had been reinforced by the 3rd Brigade of the 2nd Armored Division, Hell on Wheels, giving it 3 full maneuver brigades. Task Force 141 Infantry, built around the 1st Battalion 41st Infantry Regiment and the 3rd Battalion 66th Armor, would be the spearhead, the tip of the spear. Their mission: pass through the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment's positions in total darkness and continue the attack east toward Objective Norfolk. Find what's left of the Tawakalna Division. Destroy it. Simple, brutal, effective. At midnight on February 27th, The two lead brigades of the First Infantry Division were positioned along the 75 easting. Ahead of them, 10 kilometers of Iraqi-held territory. Rain had turned to fog, visibility dropping to less than 1,000 meters. No air support, no helicopter reconnaissance, just thermal sights, GPS navigation, and the knowledge that somewhere in that darkness, Iraqi armor was waiting. The Big Red One attacked. What the Iraqis experienced that night can only be described as overwhelming violence. American tanks and Bradleys advancing at speed through the fog, thermal sights identifying Iraqi vehicles at ranges the Iraq. American tanks and Bradleys advancing at speed through the fog, thermal sights identifying Iraqi vehicles at ranges the Iraqis couldn't match. M1A1 Abrams firing on the move, hitting targets while traveling at 30 miles per hour. Sabot rounds punching through T-72 armor from 3,000 meters. Bradley 25mm chain guns shredding Iraqi infantry fighting vehicles and trucks. And behind the lead elements, artillery. The 4th Battalion, 3rd Field Artillery Regiment. The 210th Field Artillery Brigade, M270 multiple launch rocket systems. On February 27th alone, 3rd Armored Division Artillery conducted 42 fire missions and fired 827 rounds at Iraqi targets. MLRS units fired 555 rockets. Iraqi command posts, artillery batteries, reserve positions. Everything behind the front line was being systematically destroyed before Iraqi forces even knew they were under attack. The Iraqis tried to fight back. Initially, thousands of Iraqi infantrymen engaged American forces with Sagar anti-tank missiles and RPGs from dug-in defensive positions. The defensive network consisted of bunkers, dug-in vehicles, berms, trenches, a textbook defensive position. Behind them, a dozen field artillery batteries provided fire support. It didn't matter. American command and control was too good. Combined arms tactics, tanks, infantry, artillery, engineers working together, overwhelmed Iraqi positions that should have been able to hold. When Iraqi artillery tried to engage, American counterbattery radar identified their positions instantly. Within minutes, MLRS rockets were landing on Iraqi guns before they could displace. Task Force 141 infantry encountered and destroyed an entire Iraqi tank battalion. 58 tanks, 41 anti-aircraft artillery pieces, massive quantities of ammunition and equipment. The 2nd Battalion, 34th Armor destroyed the 9th Armored Brigade of the Tawakalna Division, an entire Republican Guard armored brigade eliminated in hours. By dawn on February 27th, the 1st Infantry Division controlled Objective Norfolk, and the Tawakalna Mechanized Infantry Division had ceased to exist as a fighting force. The British 1st Armored Division was fighting its own battle on the right flank of 7th Corps. Their mission: protect the American advance by destroying Iraqi forces to the south. Their adversary: the Iraqi 52nd Armored Division and multiple infantry divisions. Over 48 hours of continuous combat, British forces destroyed or isolated 4 Iraqi infantry divisions, the 26th, 48th, 31st, and 25th. They defeated the 52nd Armored Division in sharp, violent engagements. British Challenger 1 tanks proved their worth, matching American Abrams performance shot for shot. And on February 27th, a British Challenger 1 scored the longest confirmed tank kill in history. 4.7 kilometers, nearly 3 miles. An Iraqi T-55, hit with an armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot round at a range most tankers would consider impossible. The Iraqi tank never knew what hit it. By midnight on February 27th, there was no organized Iraqi resistance between the British 1st Armored Division and the Persian Gulf. The entire southern flank of the Iraqi army had collapsed. The numbers from Norfolk tell the story. The 1st Infantry Division alone destroyed 550 tanks, 480 armored personnel carriers, and captured over 11,400 prisoners of war. 7th Corps as a whole, which included Norfolk, Medina Ridge, and other engagements, destroyed 1,350 Iraqi tanks, 1,224 armored personnel carriers, 285 artillery pieces, 105 air defense systems, and 1,229 trucks. 8 Iraqi divisions were destroyed during the Battle of Norfolk, not defeated, not pushed back, destroyed, eliminated as combat-effective organizations. American casualties, 6 soldiers killed in action, all from friendly fire incidents. The Tawakalna Division, Iraq's most powerful, Saddam's elite, the unit that was supposed to stop the American advance, was annihilated in less than 24 hours. The 18th Mechanized Brigade and 9th Armored Brigade were gone. The 37th Armored Brigade of the 12th Iraqi Armored Division, caught trying to reinforce the Tawakalna, was destroyed before it could deploy. Survivors later described the battle as incomprehensible. American tanks appearing out of fog and darkness, firing and killing at ranges Iraqi tankers couldn't reach. Artillery strikes landing with no warning. Attack helicopters, AH-64 Apache from the 2nd Battalion, 1st Aviation Division, killing anything that moved. The few Iraqi units that tried to counterattack were obliterated before they traveled 100 meters. One Iraqi officer, a tank battalion commander, said his unit received orders to advance and engage the Americans. He moved his tanks forward. Within 5 minutes, every vehicle in his battalion was burning. He never saw the American tanks that killed them. The Battle of Norfolk doesn't get the attention that 73 Easting receives. 73 Easting has the dramatic narrative, Captain McMaster's aggressive push beyond the limit of advance, the perfect clash of reconnaissance forces. It's been studied at West Point, written about in military journals, immortalized as the last great tank battle of the 20th century. But Norfolk was bigger, more important, more decisive. 73 Easting involved 9 Abrams tanks, 12 Bradleys, and elements of 3 squadrons from the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. Norfolk involved 2 full American divisions, the 1st Infantry and 3rd Armored, plus the British 1st Armored Division. Thousands of armored vehicles, tens of thousands of soldiers. It was the decisive engagement that broke the Republican Guard's back and ended any hope Iraq had of holding southern Kuwait. It was also faster. 73 Easting lasted 23 minutes of primary engagement, with follow-on fighting over several hours. Norfolk was a 24-hour continuous assault that covered over 10 kilometers of Iraqi defensive positions. The Big Red One moved through enemy territory at speeds that Iraqi commanders couldn't comprehend. By the time Iraqi units identified American positions and tried to respond, the Americans had already advanced past them and were killing the reserves behind them. The speed of the advance wasn't just impressive, it was psychologically devastating. Iraqi defensive doctrine assumed they'd have time to identify enemy positions, coordinate defensive fire, move reserves to threatened sectors. At Norfolk, none of that happened. American units appeared, destroyed everything in front of them, and were gone before Iraqi commanders could react. General Norman Schwarzkopf's plan for the ground war, the famous left hook or Hail Mary, depended on destroying the Republican Guard, not pushing them back, not forcing them to retreat, destroying them, eliminating Iraq's strategic reserve so thoroughly that Saddam would have no choice but to accept defeat. Norfolk accomplished that mission. After Norfolk, the Tawakalna Division no longer existed. The Hammurabi Division and Medina Division were next, both destroyed in subsequent engagements. Within 100 hours of the ground war starting, Iraq's entire Republican Guard was combat ineffective. The units that were supposed to defend Baghdad, the elite formations that were supposed to stop coalition forces, gone. On February 28, 1991, President George H.W. Bush ordered a ceasefire. The ground war was over. 100 hours, exactly as Schwarzkopf had predicted. Critics later questioned why coalition forces stopped at the Iraqi border instead of pushing to Baghdad, why they didn't finish Saddam Hussein. The answer lies in what happened at Norfolk. The objective wasn't regime change. It was liberating Kuwait and destroying Iraq's ability to threaten its neighbors. After Norfolk, Iraq's military was shattered. Mission accomplished. Whether that was the right decision is a different debate, but the soldiers of the Big Red One weren't thinking about politics on February 27th. They were thinking about the next objective, the next enemy position, the next mission, and they completed every one with the same pride of service that General Pershing had recognized 73 years earlier. There's a memorial in Washington, D.C., just north of the White House, the First Division Monument, a pink granite column topped with a gilded bronze figure of victory. It was dedicated in 1924 to honor the 5,516 soldiers of the First Division who died in World War I. Additions were made over the decades: World War II, Vietnam, and in 1995 a plaque for Desert Storm. The soldiers of the Big Red One who fought at Norfolk are part of that legacy now, part of a tradition that stretches from Cantigny to Normandy to Vietnam to the Iraqi desert. No mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great, duty first. At Norfolk, the Big Red One proved that motto still meant something. They destroyed the most powerful division in the Iraqi army in less than a day. They advanced 260 kilometers over 100 hours, engaging 11 Iraqi divisions. They took 11,400 prisoners and destroyed over 500 tanks. And they did it with the same pride of service and high morale that had never been broken by hardship nor battle. The Battle of Norfolk was the end of the Republican Guard, the end of Iraq's ability to resist.